This might come as a shock to you, but the original contract that's agreed upon between you as the buyer and the seller is not set in stone. It's malleable, which means, if you don't know what the word is, that it can be changed or altered. Hashtag word of the day. But in order to change a contract, you need to understand one specific form. This form is called the addendum, and in today's video, I'm gonna teach you what the addendum is, how to use it, and the common situations where you will use it. And if you are new to the channel, my name is Justin, you're wrong. I'm a real estate investor and entrepreneur here in Las Vegas. I've made hundreds of videos teaching people about real estate, and the goal of this channel is to help you grow your money and your mindset. Also, if you want to see more personal content, follow me on Instagram at JustinYou'reWrong. And before I get into this video, let me just put a disclaimer that this is not legal advice. I'm always very hesitant about making these kinds of videos because we're talking contracts or things that attorneys might want to talk about. So this is not legal advice. This is just from my experience what the addendum is used for. And also, this is not a beginner walkthrough on a purchase agreement. I actually made a separate video on that, but today we're just going to be going over the addendum. So if you do not know what a purchase agreement is or you're not familiar with it, I recommend you watch that video I made first. And if you want to watch that, go to the link in the description below so you can watch that first. And after you watch it, then you can come back to this video and finish this one, because the addendum is something that is very important to understanding what you can do to change or alter the purchase agreement. But if you already watched that purchase agreement video, then let's get right into this addendum. So what you are looking at right now is just what an addendum looks like. It's a lot simpler than you might think. Like, it's literally, this is the entire page. What you're looking at, this is the addendum. It's nothing fancy, but how it works is you use this sheet or this contract to alter whatever agreement that you already had. So if you wanted to change any of the terms of your agreement for whatever reason, you can use this addendum contract. So here's how it works. The top, you have addendum number blank to residential purchase agreement. So this is saying that this is the addendum contract for your purchase agreement contract, something that you should already know. And if you don't know what that is, watch the other video I made, link in the description. But what you enter right here is what addendum number it is. So if this is the first addendum that you're making for the purchase agreement, like the first change that you have to make to the original terms, in this blank spot, you just write a 1. If it's the second time you do this, you write a 2. If it's the third addendum you make, you write a 3. So pretty self-explanatory. Often you might have multiple addendums throughout the escrow. That's why there's a blank spot for this addendum number. But how it works is you read the first part in reference to the residential purchase agreement between blank as buyers and blank as sellers, dated blank, covering the real property located at blank. So what you do here, it might be pretty obvious, but you enter the buyer's name right here. So you enter your name right here. You also could use your LLC name for that if you have an LLC, because a lot of people do ask if you do need an LLC to invest in real estate. And the quick answer to that is no, you do not. I do recommend you have an LLC if you know you're gonna continue to buy more properties, but if you're just starting out, no, you do not need an LLC, so don't use that as an excuse to never get started. But anyways, you have the buyer's name, you have the seller's name, and then you have the date right here, so you can enter the date of this addendum that you're creating, covering real property located at, right here in this blank, you enter the property address. Next thing you read is both parties agree to the residential purchase agreement shall be amended as follows. And in this blank section right here, this is your time to shine, your time to write anything that you need to write to addend the agreement. So there are a lot of reasons and things that you can put in this section to addend the contract, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Let me just finish reading through the contract so you can understand. So the last part of this addendum agreement is this section right here. All parties of this purchase agreement have been informed and agreed to the purpose of this addendum and will furthermore agree and understand the original contract terms will remain unchanged. So this is saying that all the terms of the original contract will remain the exact same. The only thing that is changing is what you enter in this blank space right here. So you have the same exact contract, same term, same agreement, except one thing. Unless you have multiple things in this section for the blank spot, but otherwise you have one change and everything else stays the same. And if they agree upon it, you agree upon it, then you just sign where you need to sign. So seller signs here, and there's just multiple spots for the seller if you have multiple sellers, and then the buyer signs here. If you want to add another buyer to this, it should be pretty self-explanatory, like maybe there are 2 buyers. You can just copy this, and you can go to the next line, and then add another one underneath. So that's all that really is on the addendum contract-wise. You know what it is, you know why it's used, but now I want to explain a couple reasons as far as why you might use one. But one of the most common reasons why I use an addendum is to extend the close of escrow date. I usually have to extend the close of escrow date for a variety of reasons. There's so many reasons why you might need to extend the close of escrow date, but for some reason it just kind of happens a lot for me, and it's probably my fault for not staying on top of my transactions as much as I should be. I should be, and you should be, planning ahead of time to make sure that you don't have to extend escrow, but sometimes it's inevitable. So let me tell you about a deal of mine where I'm having to use the addendum to extend the close of escrow for one reason. So currently I am in 3 purchase escrows, which means that I am in escrow to buy 3 different homes. And in one of those deals specifically, I'm having to extend the close of escrow. Here's the situation. So me and the seller both had agreed that the seller would be the one to evict the tenant so that he can deliver the home vacant to me, so that there would be no tenant in there, and so that I would buy the home with no tenant. Well, we both came to agreement of a 30-day escrow to give the tenant enough time to move out, but keep in mind this was a Section 8 tenant. And if you do not know what a Section 8 tenant is, it's basically a tenant who gets help from the government to pay for the rent. But with this particular tenant, they're having a hard time dealing with Section 8 because they're getting slow response times to get their voucher so that they can get a new place to live in. And for them, without an updated Section 8 voucher, they're not able to rent out a new place and also get help from the government to pay for the rent. So right now, the seller, and me too, but we both want the tenant to make sure that they get their voucher so that they can find a new place and have a new place to live, especially because the seller and the tenant have a good relationship and he wants to make sure that they have a good place to stay. So for that reason, to make sure that we're giving enough time for the tenant to find a new place to stay that they can afford, we're making sure to extend the close of escrow 30 extra days. And in order to extend the escrow, we used an addendum. So on the addendum, all I typed out was close of escrow to be this date instead of whatever date we chose before. And that's just one way the addendum can be used. You can use it for a bunch of reasons. However, I will say that that's probably my most common reason as to why I will use an addendum, to extend the close of escrow. Another reason might just be a change in the purchase price. So maybe after your due diligence period where you are inspecting the property, maybe you come across other things that you did not know about the property and you now have to budget for a bigger rehab. Well, if that's the case, you probably would have to come back to the seller and try to either renegotiate or just back out of the deal if you're still in your due diligence period. So for whatever reason, maybe you actually do go to the property and you find out that something needs to be repaired that you did not budget for. You can be pretty straight up honest with them saying, hey, we did not expect this in the repairs, and in order for this deal to make sense, we really need to be at this price. You can kind of approach it in that way. I've seen some success there. However, another strategy is just to be super upfront and honest with them, which works really well, at least in my experience. So you can just kind of go to these sellers if you do have to renegotiate. So you can tell them something like, look, I completely misjudged this deal, completely miscalculated the numbers, it's all my fault. And in order for this deal to make sense, for us to make money on it, we need to be at this price instead. So you can approach it that way too. And honestly, both of those strategies or tactics, they're not really tactics, they're just kind of being honest, but both of those ways work for me and they might work for you too. And if you and the seller actually renegotiate a new price, you can change it with the addendum. So instead of writing up an entire new contract, you can go to the addendum and in that blank spot where you can write the terms, you can say purchase price to be blank, whatever price that is, instead of whatever price you originally had it at. So that's what the addendum is for. You can change anything about the contract and it could be as simple as that. Just purchase price is this instead of this. You don't even need to write the reasoning as to why the purchase price dropped in the addendum. Like you can just write purchase price change to this. Another reason why you might want to use an addendum is to add a new party to the contract. So there are a bunch of different scenarios as to why you might want to add a new party to the contract. For one example, maybe you start to raise money and for a particular deal, you're the buyer and you have a seller and you have an agreed upon purchase agreement. Then let's say your plan is to flip this property, but in order to flip the property, you need to raise private money. And maybe you're raising private money from an individual and someone agrees to actually lend you money on this deal. And they want to lend you all the money. So all the money for the purchase price, all the money for the closing cost, and all the money for the rehab cost. So they're like, hey, I can lend you everything for this property, but we want to make it a partnership and I want to be on title too. So maybe they want to be a part of the purchase agreement and the actual buyer. So maybe they want it to say, hey, the buyer is your name and my name so that they feel secured. Sometimes a private money lender might want that, and it's no big deal, but if you want to add them, you have to use an addendum. So on the addendum, you can say, hey, there's an additional buyer and this is their name, or like whatever. Like you can add that super easily and it's not a big deal. As long as the seller understands why and they sign off on it, you can add another buyer with the addendum super easily. So as you might be able to tell already, there are countless reasons as to why and how you can use an addendum. You can even use the addendum if you forgot to add something in the contract when you meant to. So for example, for all of my contracts, I have a social media clause, and that clause states that I can create content regarding the deal. So I'm basically asking the seller for permission to create content and talk about the deal without disclosing any personal or identifying information. And if for some whatever reason I forgot to add that clause to the contract, I can always use an addendum to add it. So in the addendum, I can just add my social media clause saying, hey, I want to use this deal to create content for YouTube and stuff like that. Then they can agree upon it and we can add that clause to the contract through an addendum. So the addendum is a pretty flexible contract, and those are just a few of the ways that you can use it. And if you want to use this addendum for your own business, then I've added the link in the description below and you can download it for free. Also, if you want help to grow your real estate business, whether you are brand new or if you already have deals under your belt, DM me the word coach on Instagram at JustinYouWrong. Peace.